I teach an undergraduate class called Teaching with Technology. At the beginning of each semester, I ask my students this question. It's an ambiguous question in a couple of respects. In the first place, the answer changes significantly over time. When I asked this question just a couple of years ago, the answer was fairly predictable, as Twitter had not really entered the mainstream of social media at that time. But when I ask it today, as I did at the beginning of this semester's class, the most typical response is this one. It says a lot about the place of social networking in many of our current students' lives. For many, if not most of the college-age demographic, social networking is all about maintaining regular contact with friends, and most of this centers around Facebook. Most of the mainstream methods of online communication, including instant messaging, texting, email, and telephony, have coalesced under the huge umbrella that is Facebook. It makes one wonder how Twitter can be used effectively in a post-secondary classroom. Before we discuss that, let's take a look at some demographics that may help you understand the extent to which you might encounter Twitter users in your classes. Given the very high percentage of the college-age demographic that uses social networking tools, it's not what you might think. First of all, about half of all Twitter users interact with Twitter using a mobile device. That number is increasing rapidly with the advent of tablets and smartphones. And as you're no doubt aware, cell phone use among 18 to 29-year-olds is very nearly universal. It may not be the case that every student will walk into your class with a laptop, but I'd wager that they'll all arrive with their phones with them. Twitter use among 18 to 29-year-olds is not nearly as widespread as Facebook. 14% of all 18 to 29-year-olds use Twitter. The average age of a Twitter user is 39.1. Of all Twitter users, at least 57% use Twitter essentially for social purposes. Only about 10% use Twitter to comment on news or blogs or other potentially academic purposes. Of online users who use Twitter, blacks and Hispanics are more than twice as likely to use Twitter than whites. The purpose behind presenting these statistics is to demonstrate that even among a college-age demographic that uses social networking tools extensively, you shouldn't necessarily expect to encounter students in your courses that have had extensive or even minimal experience with Twitter on which you might build some instruction. Statistically, many of them will never have used Twitter at all. You're going to have to do a bit of teaching. What might those students look like? Based on statistics and on my own experience using Twitter in my classes, college-age students who do use Twitter fall roughly into three categories. At the most basic level, a Twitter user might be called a follower, which I would define as someone who uses Twitter to keep up with celebrities, news, causes, or organizations, and to message friends and to post their own current status. I suspect that the majority of these users use mobile devices for these purposes. When we, as educators, use Twitter to send out announcements, reminders, or even assignments, we're catering to the follower and not necessarily expecting any interaction or response in that medium. The next level is participant, which I would define as someone who is involved in some form of interchange or interaction as a response to an interest, or in the case of many classrooms, a response to an assignment or a classroom workflow. Educators who tweet questions that require responses, who ask students to contribute to a discussion via Twitter, who ask students to collaborate on projects outside of the classroom, or who have students collectively research a topic with Twitter, are speaking to the student as a Twitter participant. This is a powerful and constructive way to use Twitter, but in the context of a post-secondary course, a participant might limit his or her involvement with Twitter to the assignments and projects that are endemic to that particular class workflow. A collaborator, on the other hand, disassociates Twitter from the context of a specific course or assignment and repurposes it to form an integral part of his or her own personal and professional development. They're able to select resources and mentors to form personal learning networks and to carry their professional development with them to the next profession or series of professions. While you might not expect students to reach this level, it can be of particular benefit to them once they have left the university. Some of the early studies on Twitter in higher education have suggested that students are more engaged and get better grades when they participate in classes that incorporate Twitter into the overall instructional design. So how do we get them where they need to go? On this podcast companion website, you'll find several links to sites with ideas for using Twitter in higher education. I strongly recommend that you review those. I'll highlight a few of those here. This is potentially one of the most powerful tools for using Twitter in a classroom setting, particularly in large classrooms in which students may not get an opportunity to participate in the conversation, to ask questions, or to offer feedback. By displaying a real-time Twitter stream during class, instructors can solicit feedback from students in the class by using a hashtag created specifically for that class or that topic. And the participants do not need to be physically present in the classroom. Back-channeling is a simple way to include mentors or guests from anywhere in the world in a real-time discussion in your classroom. These screenshots are taken from an excellent video called the Dallas Twitter Experiment, which is linked on this podcast resource tab. It's well worth 5 minutes of your time to watch that one. There are 3 tools that I'd suggest for using Twitter as a back channel. TweetGrid requires almost no configuration and is a simple way to view one or multiple Twitter conversations in real time. Twijector allows for only one topic at a time, but its large, uncluttered display makes it particularly projector-friendly in large classrooms. And HootCourse is unique in that you can restrict your Twitter conversations to members of your class and prevent your tweets from entering the public Twitter stream. This might be useful if you're discussing a topic such as counseling, which involves privacy issues. This is a screenshot from TwitPoll, a web-based service that allows you to create free online polls accessible through Twitter and also through Facebook and email if you want. The potential for real-time polling in a classroom is enormous. Instructors can check for understanding, collect opinions on a topic, or give simple quizzes and have the results available for immediate discussion. Polls can be used asynchronously out of the classroom for the same purposes. TwitPoll results are projector-friendly, making it a good tool for large classrooms. This is a screenshot from Paperly, an online service that follows tweets about a particular topic, collects them, and publishes them in a journal format accessible from any web browser. Paperly journals are updated every 24 hours by default, but owners can change the frequency to weekly or twice daily if need be. Accessing any specific journal will return the most current edition, but you can access any back issue as well to see snapshots in time of a particular topic. If a tweet includes a link to an article or a blog post, that post is reproduced in the Paperly edition along with the tweet itself. Tweets and articles are automatically categorized by Paperly, highlighted in red on this screenshot, making it very accessible. The possibilities are endless. Instructors can use Paperly to keep records of class discussions. I use it to keep weekly journals of my students' tweets, or as an out-of-class review for class content. Students can create their own journals for collecting research or working on collaborative projects. Lately, we've been witnessing the incredible power of Twitter and social media in general in the Tunisian and Egyptian uprisings. While current events might not be the focus of every classroom, it's hard to imagine that being able to follow events or even conferences or meetings in real time does not have some applicability to most situations. Imagine a journalism classroom using TweetGrid to follow the Tunisia hashtag in one column while actively discussing and commenting on it in a second. Whether or not Twitter is a one-way street in which we send information to students, or a two-way street on which we actively engage students in and out of the classroom in relevant topics, is a function of instructional design. This has been the focus of my teaching for several years, trying to design ways to engage students in active learning process through social media tools such as Twitter. Some of my recent experiences with campus-based and distance students may help illuminate this process. I've been using social networking tools, including Twitter, for the past 4 years with varying degrees of success, both in on-campus and in distance sections of my Teaching with Technology course. The two sections cover the same material at the same time, and the students even interact on projects, but they do not meet together or receive instruction at the same time. I have evolved to require that students in both groups establish Twitter accounts and personal learning networks, and over the past few semesters I've been experimenting with ways to make that process into an effective instructional and professional development tool, the utility of which should extend well past their enrollment in my class and hopefully into their careers. In that process, I've noticed some interesting and instructive differences in the ways that each group tends to use Twitter in the context of the class. In the past, my on-campus students' tweets, when they tweeted, typically looked like this, directed largely toward me and concerned with the structure of the class itself. My distance students' tweets, usually more frequent than those of my on-campus students, were more like these. Notably, they tended to be directed toward each other or to the class as a whole and were concerned with the content of the class. On the surface, it's perhaps not surprising why this happens. Campus-based students work and live in fairly close proximity to each other and have sources of support that distance students, more typically working in isolation, and in Alaska that can be very isolated, often do not have. It's natural that distance students would use Twitter to collaborate on projects and to feel connected to their cohort, both distance and on campus. Class discussions and evaluations with both groups have tended to reinforce that point. But I think there's another reason, and it involves the structure of our education system. Most classes are still very teacher-centered, and it's not surprising that the lines of communication, even with social networking tools, tend to mirror the lines of communication that we have reinforced in our students since kindergarten. Getting students to use Twitter effectively requires both instructional planning and investment by the instructor in the workflow of the class. Carrots are good, but you also sometimes need a stick. In that regard, I think it's important that instructors actively work with students to develop fluency and facility with Twitter as part of their overall instructional design. This includes how and when to retweet, how to categorize and mine information using hashtags, how to create and work with lists, how to shorten URLs, and all the other features that make Twitter a critical tool for communication and research. We simply can't assume that students will enter our classes with these skills already in place. This can be done asynchronously and does not necessarily need to take up class time, but it does mean that the instructor needs to be actively involved in understanding and enforcing the rules of the game. Here's how I do it, at least for the current semester. This is a screenshot from my Teaching with Technology class. There's a link to this site on the resource tab for this podcast. It's open to everyone, and I'm always appreciative of comments and suggestions. As you can see, I require students to develop and participate in personal learning networks using Twitter and Digo throughout the semester. This is a graded assignment, and it also constitute parts of their final reflection project for the class. This is part of the evaluation rubric that deals with Twitter. I expect students to tweet at least weekly, to grow their PLN by finding new people to follow each week, and to use correct conventions when tweeting. I'm intentionally not evaluating them on the quality of their tweets, as this is taken care of through other content assignments than through class discussions. I'm using the stick of the gradebook to make sure that students are actively using Twitter as part of the workflow for the class. Carrots come in the form of incentives through participation in collaborative projects that are largely completed outside of class time. We use class time for students to present their work in progress and to benefit from each other's insight or problems. My experience, and the experiences of some of the folks in my personal learning network, has led me to conclude that there are several ingredients that help ensure a successful integration of Twitter into a post-secondary course. Students need to find their own way with Twitter, but they also need to be compelled to use it as part of the class workflow. Making Twitter a required element of your assignments works much better than simply making it an option. We also can't assume that students will be able to use Twitter fluently without some form of intervention from their instructors. Again, this does not necessarily mean class time. Podcasts, study sessions, or ad hoc users groups are effective tools, but paying some attention to protocols in class provides a good opportunity for instructors to model effective use. I suppose it should go without saying that students need to see how the use of this tool can enhance their understanding of the subject, can engage them in meaningful research and reporting, and can provide avenues for collaboration both within and outside of the formal classroom structure. And if we're simply sending students announcements and assignments via Twitter, we're missing the real value of the tool. Students can, and usually will, express their opinions and make their voices heard when this is valued and encouraged in a student-centered classroom. Finally, progress toward becoming an effective Twitter user takes time. You may be fortunate enough to inherit students who have already experienced Twitter integration into their courses or who have already built a personal learning network. But if you don't, you and your students will need to put in some time and effort over a semester to really see the value in using Twitter. Thank you, and please keep in touch.